العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. It's actually an honor to be here with you all, alhamdulillah, and the sharaf and the honor that you've given me for being in the last few days your guest. I don't know what exactly I'm going to speak about, but may Allah guide our tongues, as you said. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So you had asked me, I'm going to share a couple of things, inshallah ta'ala, about my background, as I guess that is unique or interesting. But then I want to share with you a couple of things before we have a Q&A session. So as Dr. Ahmed said, I am at the Medical College of Wisconsin presently. I am an emergency medicine physician. I spend time doing a lot of research, so I'm a research scientist. And I study how Islam impacts Muslims' healthcare, both patients and physicians. And I do some work on Islamic bioethics. But this idea of bringing two things together, medicine and Islam, I guess was not something I initially chose, right? So I grew up in a household that was very religious, alhamdulillah. There were a lot of ulama in our family. And when you have a lot of ulama in your family, you try to run away from ulama, as you can imagine. Yeah, so alhamdulillah, ulama in our family, my father, alhamdulillah, may Allah bless him, had a Darul-Uloom, so we were part of the Deobandi system there. And I being the son of my father, I had the ability to be the worst student in the class, but no one would say anything. So we studied a little bit while I was in high school with teachers, and at the same time I was doing secondary school. And as a Pakistani, so someone asked my last name is Padela. It's actually Eminent. So my grandparents were Muhajirin from India to Pakistan at that time. So that's the background. But as you can imagine, a lot of Pakistani children they don't have this dream, but their parents have this dream that they'll become doctors. Yes, for some reason. So my parents had this dream. Nonetheless, I pursued sciences. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened doors for me. And I went into undergraduate, where I studied Fusha, classical Arabic, and I studied Sharia. I was at AUC and spent some time in the circles around Azhar. And at the same time, I was studying biomedical engineering. So that was my background. And then, alhamdulillah, in the United States system, after you do your undergraduate degrees, you go into medical school, and I went to medical school. But what I think is interesting, I wanted to share this with you, is that I still, in my mind, had this idea that I wasn't going to bring these things together. Though I had some training in Islamic sciences, or some studies, I wasn't trained, I would say, some studies. I did not think I was going to bring them together. I was just going to be a physician. And alhamdulillah, I used the rest of my time to do, the dini stuff that we do, like these majlis, sit together and have sessions. But 9/11 happened while I was in medical school. And so I think it's interesting, as someone mentioned, I was sitting over there about 9/11. I'll share this story, which I don't usually share with people, which might give you a sense of how we, at times, are put in situations where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens doors for us that you didn't think about. So I was in New York City in medical school, in Cornell, which the medical school is on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, so 68th Street. And the Twin Towers are on the south side of Manhattan. In the same line, so on the east side. So that day, I was in medical school. We have a break at about 8:45 from our first class, where all the students go out and get coffee. And we went out to get coffee and donut and bagels, and then we heard that there was some plane that hit the first tower. We didn't know what was going on, and so we went back into the class at 9:10. I think our class starts, at 9 o'clock our class starts, and then we saw all of these professors, the deans of the medical school, coming in and saying, you all need to call your parents and go home. You all need to leave because there's been an incident downtown. So as we left, and we left, and across the street were our dorms. And at that time, when we all went back into our rooms, we saw the second tower go down. Now, this is kind of the moment that was very life-changing for me. At that moment, when we saw this, I saw in my friend's dorm room the tower go down. I had two ideas in my mind. The first idea was that we should pray. When something happens in front of you, what is your response? The one who has Qadru ala kulli shay, you're the one you're supposed to respond to him. And you're Muslim. Most of my class, I was two Muslims. There were two Muslims in our class. So he said, well, we need to make dua, we need to pray. But I didn't have Muslims, right? So we couldn't go and pray. So I need to go to my room and do salah or something. Salat al-Hajjah or something, I need to do this. And I felt this way very strongly at that time because of the upbringing that my parents had. That whenever there was an issue, when you would see us, right, you would hear the hadith, when there's a storm, Rasulullah used to go to the masjid, pray salah. When this happened, you would pray salah. So in our household, it was, something happens, the first thing you do is pray 2 rak'ah, right? No. And so this was my upbringing, so I said, okay, now I have to go pray. But then I realized in my mind that I am also now in the medical profession. Perhaps people will need some help. Maybe I should do something else aside from salah. Because as a professional, now you have some tools, right? We're all Muslimin, we have one tool, the best tool, but we have something else. So at that moment, I went to my room, I prayed salah, and I said, no, I have to go to the emergency department. So I went to the emergency department to help people who were coming after. So because I had training, I was a paramedic, they put me on a team. I saw 2, 3, 4 people. But after 2 or 3 hours, no one was coming. Now this is where sort of things change again. So no one was coming. I said, okay, I'm Muslim. At that time, I was wearing a kufi. I had a very long beard because I had gone to a very religious school. And I said, I'm going to go downtown to where all this calamity has happened. And so I wanted to get on the bus. Yeah. So I wanted to get on the bus. So I went out of the hospital. There was a bus station. I wanted to get on the bus, and when the bus came by, and the guy looked at me, and he didn't open the door. Another bus comes by, now I'm with 2 medical students. I'm wearing a white coat. I was just in the ER for 3 hours, right? It doesn't open. And then I realized, because I hadn't realized anything, I realized something must be going on in the air, because I was in the ER. So I went to my friend's house, and there was a news channel. They're talking about, the Muslims in 1993 had bombed the World Trade Center. The Muslims have done this again. The Muslims this, the Muslims that. And I realized at that moment that for me, my identity, which was, right, has going to be in the crosshairs for the rest of my career. That if I wanted to hide as a Muslim, I couldn't hide. I could no longer be someone who was assimilated. And because I was also a Muslim, was very prominently Muslim, wearing a beard and a kufi at that time, that this might be very difficult not for me, but for everybody else. And so that day, so I'm going to shorten the story, but that day was at that moment, the juxtaposition of my identities as a Muslim and as someone who's trying to become a professional came together in an interesting way. So the next morning, I'll finish this story in a second. So the next morning, if I needed any more confirmation, we had a debrief with our 112 students, with the deans, right? Because we had this huge event happen. And so they wanted to have a session where people could voice their concerns, their anxieties, we'd had a huge, terrible loss of life. And I remember a student saying that, to the extent that now America knows how many parts in the world where Muslims live, how the Muslims act against the larger society. And I'm not going to say, I'm being on video, I'm not going to say what country he mentioned. But he mentioned now that America knows what other people who have a lot of Muslims in their midst and they do a lot of bad things feel like. And being one of the 2 Muslims in the class, I got up and I left. And I got up and I left, and later on that afternoon, the dean who had interviewed me for medical school found me. He was worried about me. And he said, okay, Aasim, you have a choice to make in your life. Either you can decide to be who you are and use your background as a Muslim to make the relationship between a patient and a doctor a better one. Because for a patient, they need to know who their doctor is. They need to trust their doctor. And you being who you are might be able to use this relationship as when there's a bridge building. Or you go and hide and be like everybody else. And so this is your choice. But I believe, and why he had interviewed me, that this might be a chance for people to build bridges through medicine. And then at that time, in the 25 years after, I've been doing work to build those bridges, because I am in a medical school and medical college in the United States, where obviously there are not that many Muslims who are in prominent positions. There are not many Muslim physicians who are professors. There are not many people looking at Islamic bioethics, so to speak. But I believe it's our responsibility as a minority community to live our ideals out and to use our positions that we get to make changes in this world where people understand Islam. And we talk about the fact that we have a faith and it has all the answers, Islam wal hal. Yet, oftentimes, we ourselves don't know what that hal is, so we can't give it to anybody. Yeah? So that's the back. Was that sufficient? That's the background story of who I am, how I came to be in medicine. Perhaps that was helpful. But I wanted to share one more thing with you before we open the session. So oftentimes, and not this gathering, mashallah, you're medicine individuals, but people sort of think about, or for me, always it comes, why should we think about being physicians, right?
I know.
And I want to share with you something that's been really prominent through that there are very few professions where you can say that you are actually visiting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every day. Huh? How? Because we know the hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of will ask a slave, he'll say, I was ill, right? But you didn't come visit me, iyada, right? And he'll say, Ya Rabbul Alameen, how can I visit you? So, well, so and so, my servant was with me, and if you visited him, then you would find me with him. So there are many. How many professions can you say that every day I go to visit a patient, that I actually am visiting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that room? Huh? Not only that we often go as physicians, we think that we are doing some service, but we know through many ahadith, and I won't go through them all, that the patient's prayer, the dua, sometimes is like the dua of the angels. That you don't go in there to do something for them. You ask them for their dua, so that you can be saved. So how many professions are there that you can every day meet someone who is like the malaika, whose dua is accepted if you ask them to make dua? Not only that, then the question becomes, so the patient, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in that room, or that's right? The patient is there, and that patient's elevated in rank. But you then get to witness every day, whether you're a biologist or whatever, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will see that you will know that this is the truth, that you can see every day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ayat in front of you. How He acts. We think we know the body, but we know nothing. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us His ayat every day. So I think this is why, not because we want to have positions and money and good houses and whatever, but rather that we are able to visit and to witness Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every day in our profession. So may also help all those, right, who are struggling to find purpose in their professions and make it easy for them. But this is why, perhaps for me, it's a noble profession. Alhamdulillah.
As I've said, this is an open session for discussions, for answers, and for questions. But inshallah. And the first time I met Aasim was in 2010.
In Hamburg?
No, in Antalya.
Antalya, yes, Antalya, yes. Antalya.
We were the first one we met in Antalya.
Yes, Antalya, mashallah. Yes, mashallah.
And then I met him so many. And now this is the second time for those who just come. We have the Sultan Qaboos University, our National Bioethics Committee brought him again for the second conference, which is kicking off tomorrow,
inshallah.
And so the question is, what are the challenges facing Muslim youth now? In your experience? This is my first question, and then we've got so many questions coming now.
Sure. So it's very humbling to be amongst this group. And perhaps for people who know much better than I, but I'll share with you that for me, I think there's two things that are happening in our community in the United States, and I worry for this community here.
You are worried this?
I worry for this community as well. One thing that is happening for the youth, I have 4 children. My eldest is 15, going to be 16 soon. Is that we have a society in the United States where it's intolerant. It's intolerant, not just of being, maybe it's tolerant for Muslims, it's intolerant of morality that is not based on the nafs. It's intolerant of morality that is not based on your own shahwat, your own, right? That what we should be able to do is to do what we think we should be able to do, right? And whatever we want to do. And that freedom notion, I think, is antithetical to us because we say ubudiyya, right? It's not about freedom. It is when we pray salah, the first verses of the Quran, the first surah of the Quran. At the end, what does Allah make us do? We do sujood. Huh? We do sujood. Why? To put your head down to realize this is your Rabb. Huh? And it is not you. But I think our societies in the West have become very focused on a nafsi notion of morality, which pervades society. And then for Muslims who are in a minority state, you can only ally yourself with that group which allows you to be in their midst, and that is people who accept everything, right? And I think that is moral bankruptcy. So why I worry about this society is because today I was at the International Book Fair. I was there, mashallah. I couldn't finish it. It was huge, huh? It was huge. But when I was at the book fair, you would go to the booksellers from Lebanon, from Syria, from Urdun, from wherever, and you would see the books that they translate for their children. What books are they translating? What books are they translating? They're not trying Hayy ibn Yaqsan. They're not translating these. They're translating books, and they're translating characters that are all from the quote-unquote West. Huh? And the image that you see is of a princess and a prince. And the book you read is the book Emily Bronte and Wuthering Heights. And you're reading, even at the high, not just the kids, right, the comic books, but the high school level books. These are books and literature from a society that is not Muslim. And you read and uptake that, translate that, because this is what we think is the height of civilization. You're reading books from a society that was decadent, that is decadent. And this is what we give our children, to learn English, but you're not just learning English. You're learning an entire way of seeing the world. And we have no answers and no response and no nothing. And so I feel what happens is that this, I experienced this firsthand, but this educational imperialism is not just within the West, but is also in the Muslim countries that run after this sort of high ideal. And the high ideal is always set by someone else. So to me, I think that's the moral bankruptcy that is affecting our youth. And I'll end with this, on that question. So when I was at Oxford and other places, we had this response Muslims often do, that we want to quote our history. Yeah? We were the leaders in this, we were the leaders in that. But to a kid who's 15, who cares what happened 1,500 years ago? What are you holding on to 1,500 years ago? They want to see now. Where are the Muslims doing things now? Where's the ideal now? Right? And I think that because the society is, and the children today are so, they need to be able to touch and feel and see to inspire them to think something. And when they can't touch and see and feel and talk and hear someone, but they have to read these books that are from long ago, I think it makes it very difficult for them to see themselves as being able to hold on to any deen.
I think, of course, what you say, we notice that ourselves here. Yeah. But on the other hand, do you think that salvation for Islam and Muslims come from the West? Reports we're getting of Muslims after 9/11 in America and in Europe becoming more and more, and then those books, those kind of cultures, they will feel as new Muslims that maybe they're against that. And
Allah Alam, we hear this thing about Islam from the West. So I'll tell you, my wife is she's a curriculum designer. So it was this is why we're at the part of the reason why we're at the bookstore. So she makes books, she helps the company make books for Muslim kids, right? And they just did a whole project on Secrets of Salah that has a book series, it's Noor Kids, and then they also have videos with prominent scholars from the West speaking about Salah, to make this connection with Salah, not something that your parents tell you to do, not something that you understand, but rather what the purpose of Salah are for these youth who are 8 to 14. So I see these, may Allah bless her and the company, but I think there's these movements to address this, right? But in the sea of the liberal West that does not see religion as something that has anything to offer society,
but
there's
the future?
but the future for who? So my future and your future is not set by let me say it this way, I don't want here, but in a minority state, I don't control the educational system. I don't control the books they have in the library. I don't control whether I can get a job. So the point is that yes, you might have small enclaves where you control, but the outside pressures are always, I don't control the TV system. My kids have emails, I don't know what's happening on. And so my concern is that in the minority state, you're constantly being affected by the outside to create walls, right? This was the response of my parental generation. Why did we go to the madrasa? Because we didn't want you to engage with the right. Now the question is, can we, if we say we have something, can Oman and Malaysia and Saudi, can they produce something that the West doesn't know we want to have? Because you have it and we don't. We have no moral guide, you're providing us something. We have no something else, you're providing us. Do we have something to offer the world or not? And that's what I'm saying. I'm concerned about my children, because I don't know if they will have anything to hold on to, say, no, we have something that we can show you it's living and real, and feel it and touch it. Look, there's people who are people, they're whole. They're not schizophrenic and they're not anxious. They are whole individuals that live in societies and have the best of both worlds. I don't know. But that's our challenge.
Any questions?
So let's get back to bioethics.
No.
We've been getting drip feed from our brother here every other week on bioethics. So I think the question I'm asking is fundamentally, what are you doing?
No.
What's happening in the bioethics field that's going to impact the future of our future, if you like?
Well, I think so. I'll tell you what I'm working on right now, but what I think is the existential challenge for us. Okay. Bioethics is a vast field. It has to do with policy level things and people. But what I think we face as a crisis, which maybe Muslims can offer something to, is that we see human beings as human bodies, and that's it. That the idea of naturalism, right? The idea that all you are is a body. There's nothing more to you. All that you are is a disease. There's nothing more to you, has pervaded every educational system in medicine, such that even Muslims reproduce that within their own educational curricula. Let me give you an example. So right now, tomorrow you're going to speak about AI, right? AI is going to be an ethics conference. Everybody wants to talk about AI, artificial intelligence, how that's going to help healthcare. So in Japan, you have, for the problem that they have in an aging society where people over 70 are very old, there was two solutions. And you can write, there's a huge article actually that just came on New York Times where a professor talks about people in Japan after the age of 70 or something, or 75, should commit suicide because they shouldn't have burden on their children. Okay, this used to be a case in the past. If you read the societies. There was an article, that was the Japanese, there was an article written by a very prominent bioethicist in the United States who said, after 85, I will relinquish all my health care. Don't pay for anything. I don't want the government to give me any insurance. If I die by something, let me die by something. Because in the United States, we spend a lot of money in healthcare at the end of life. Okay, that was his argument. Again, something similar, not suicide, but now saying something similar. So in Japan, in the aging society, you have this notion that you can have caregivers that are robots. That because loneliness, we know, in the aged population is as bad as heart disease in terms of mortality risk. But when you have children in the society that only one child or two children in each household, there's no one to spend time with their parents. And the parents have also physical needs. And that society at least doesn't want to put them in nursing homes, right? They want to stay at home. So what do? We're going to have this chatbots, and some caregivers, the robotic caregivers that help simulate the aspect of having conversation with people, so that they don't to reduce the rates of dementia and to reduce the rates of loneliness. This is proven scientifically. This works, right? But I ask you, is a robot a human? Can the care and love that you have for your parents be given by a robot? Can the companionship be given by a robot? No. But because we think of humans as bodies, then the solutions we have are simulate bodies. You talk about organ transplantation, you talk about whatever. All it is we're simulating the physical clockwork, a mechanistic idea, but not the unseen aspect, the intangible of the human being. So that might work for a little while. Well, it might work. And data might work, but the problem is we don't correct society to be able to have children and parents or aged parents in the same household. We don't, that's not the solution we want. We want some technical solution that will solve some problem we think, but creates other problems. We're not willing to change society. So a few years ago here, right, here in Oman, the question was, I'm going to end, I go long-winded, about organ transplantation. This is a problem, and so on, organ donation, mashallah, may Allah bless you all the work you're doing. The question asked is, can we do this or not? Is it fiqh-wise, right? This was a fiqh council, we had a huge gathering around this. But the question wasn't asked, the question wasn't asked, why are people having organ failure in the United States, right? Or in the fiqh council was, okay, why we want a solution, a technical solution where you replace the organ with another organ and people donate and so on. So, okay, got that, no problem. But why aren't we addressing the solution, the problem up front, that people are having organ failure by the dietary habits that they have, by the fact that we don't provide medical care at the early stages, by the fact we are not investing money in alternate systems to take care of people. We're not doing any of the social care, right? Yet we have a highly technical solution, and the fuqaha are asked to give an answer about this highly technical solution. So I think it's the same idea. When you think of humans as interchangeable parts and bodies, then you have a solution. Let's just interchange those parts and bodies. But if you say, no, the human being is more than just a body. It has a soul, there's a mind, and there's things that we need to attend to across the lifespan, you come up with a different solution. That's what I think the issues are in med and science. And actually the last thing I'll say is that the project that I'm working on presently has to do with medical school education. Medical school education, where we have this is called a dialogue, right? A big seminar a dialogue between science and theology on 5 big questions about the human being. And each of these questions informs how we think of the human being, right? So the first question, what is the human origin, right? A science has an answer for that, but do we religiously have an answer for that? What is the human being's capacities, right? Do we have an answer for that? So is the human being able to, has capacities to do certain things? If tomorrow I change my leg and make it a bionic leg, am I still a human being? But what if I change my entire body and upload it into a computer system? Am I still a human being? Right? So what is the human's capacities? What's the human being's future? Right? Do we think about the fact that we have an afterlife or not an afterlife? Is it just this world? What is the human being's what is the human being itself? Right? Is it a body and a soul? And then we talk about, which I talked to Dr. Khadaim about, is the human being unique in the universe? Are there other beings that have taklif? Science actually has answers to these questions. Religiously we have answers to these questions, but in medical education, we learn answers to these questions because we treat the human being as a machine and it can be replaced. So tomorrow we want to work on AI and uploading bodies, right? And all your popular culture, I was talking about this, right? All your popular culture is about uploading brains. I mean, look at transhumanism stuff, and we talk about cyborgs. All the culture that all the films that we imbibe have this embedded idea. I don't know if you watched Avatar, same thing. But we don't know what our children are watching, but this is the idea that the human being is just a brain, it's a mechanistic thing, you can put in another body, and that's it. No talk about what we are really. And so these subtleties come into medical education, and no one thinks about them, particularly in religious societies. And then we have surgeons who want to create synthetic human beings, right? That's what you want to do now, because that's what your future is. We got to save these sorts of things, as opposed to, no, we want to help society, not have people who are ill. Wow.
Is cloning halal?
And then he doesn't give it cloning. And there are 2 types of cloning. I don't know which one. Reproductive cloning or therapeutic cloning.
But you know the answer. Go ahead and answer.
No. I don't know. He's asking about cloning.
Yeah.
Therapeutic cloning and reproductive cloning. You entertain it. Bismillah. King.
You talked about the challenges facing the youth.
Yes.
I think also it's facing the parents or the ones, the guardians of course. I think and that's where it should start, isn't it? Because is it because they don't have time? Is it because the religious knowledge is shallow? You know, the family unit.
Yes.
We were all brought up, and even our or teachings of Islam originates from the strong family unit. Why, with all the know-how, the knowledge, Google information, why don't we actually set something up and have this kind of, you know, dialogue with our own people, and parents to be, etc. On building this. It might be easier to connect with them than just the youth who, you know, more challenging. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So as far as reproductive about cloning, so this is something that I'll say that there's actually a variance of opinion, but as you said, the therapeutic cloning, if you consider therapeutic cloning, sometimes some scholars have allowed for before a certain stage that you can have, you might be able to grow a organ, let's say, right, and you will transplant it into your own body. So therapeutic cloning under this guise, they've allowed it. Everything else is considered haram. That's the extent I'll say, but there is this sort of notion. I think it's problematic when you think about it. The mechanism is similar, that you're treating human cells in a certain way. But that's as far as I'll go there. Your question is very interesting. I don't know, so you can advise me, right? I'm a parent and you're a parent. I think the family is there's books about this, right? The family unit is what modernity has fractured, right? The nuclear family unit is now no longer there. What used to be an extended family unit, we used to live in a more than nuclear family household, right? It used to be extended family households, that's going away. And then, so I should wait.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We've got our own
Okay.
margin.
And then the nuclear family unit, which used to be stable, now that's going. We have families defined again by different types of families today, right? Most I think there's an alarming statistic, but most children born in the United States, or nearly a huge, maybe 50%, I know at least 40-something% are born out of wedlock. Yeah? So, and I don't know what it is in Europe. So if you think about what family they have then, children, when you don't even know who your father is, or your mother, and you're one-parent household, what one-parent household can provide for all the things and then also do this? And we think it's just them. No, it's also Muslims, right? Muslims have fractured households as well. So I think that we certainly have to hold on to the family ideal, but that requires society not having, providing for families such that one parent can be potentially home. And how many families can do that in the United States, right? Or even, I mean, so that's one thing. The knowledge, second question that you asked, I think is another interesting thing. So in the United States, before 20 years ago, 15 years ago, there was no such thing for Muslims to talk about premarital counseling. You would want to get married, you would say, okay, well, I want to talk to her father, or so on and so forth. But no one said, let's talk about what marriage is. Do you know the fara'id? How do you get married? Do you know what the responsibilities are when you have a child? Do you know any of this? No one taught us that. It wasn't in our education. I mean, right? No one would get any. So you would learn nothing. You would get married. You don't know even what you're supposed to do in the first night. No, I'm being serious. It's not a joke, right? So now, if you're talking about, if you don't know that, talking about how to raise a child is another level of complexity to talk about. But where are these parenting classes happening? Nowhere. And maybe you can think it happens in your masjids or not. But oftentimes, it is not the imam that you want to give you advice on how to raise children, because, right? Unfortunately, because they're not the exemplars of that, right? They themselves are too busy, not giving enough time to their children. So this is the other problem, right? So I agree with you, the family unit, but where and who and how, right? Because if early on you get involved with, I have to make enough money so I can have food on the table, then these things become, go by the wayside. But I think it's children, I still think it's children. Why? Because I'll tell you that children ask the best questions of parents. So at the dinner table, and they say, well, I saw this, what do you think, Baba? And you say, well, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have to go figure it out. Yeah, that's the best thing at that time, because then you realize that they're getting information from somewhere else. You're ill-prepared, now it's farud ayn upon you. Get prepared, have the conversation, yeah? If you can have that dinner table.
Just to comment on Fahdi's, go back to his question.
Please, yes.
Do you understand the concept? There are two types of cloning. To clone an organ, a heart, a kidney. Then there are people who have allowed it to some extent. I don't know about the Hanafi, who are very strict about it, but we have allowed it. You can clone a heart or what is the cloning itself, cloning a human being, it's not a problem. If you only can answer a few parameters, certain questions. Otherwise, cloning a human being is a technology. It needs know-how. But then Islam does not allow it because of certain parameters, maqasid sharia. We have got mirath. Now the clone person, a woman has cloned herself. So she has appropriated all the equations of mirath, that the child has no father.
Right.
And then, now this is maqasid sharia. So deen is in is in problem now here. Number two, we have in maqasid sharia what is called genealogy, nasab. The nasab has been destroyed by cloning. And also criminology. Who has committed this crime? Is it the mother or the daughter? So these are problematic, which goes against maqasid sharia, and that's why Islam says cloning is haram. Haram because it went against maqasid sharia, not because of technology. But Christians look at it, you may disagree with me.
Okay.
The Christians look at it as you are being a creator.
So there's, I'll say two things, this is good. So my conversation tonight is not about fiqh, it's about theology. Because actually one of the questions raised was this issue, that first actually theologically, who is this being, the clone? Like what is this being, right? And this is what you're saying, is it the mother, is it the father, how do we deal with the whole nasab? But the issue is this now, this being one that has, what's the word? Is that being one that was not supposed to exist because you have now gone beyond the limits, right? That this being that you have created was not supposed to exist. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a soul up there. The soul came and put in this being, but why this being? It shouldn't have come this way. So this whole theological anthropology of what's happening was also brought up actually beyond the fiqh, because you are now messing with these. The shaitan is calling you to change, right? So you've gone beyond the limits, and now you've transgressed against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this was also a part of the conversation. It's not just the Christians, but we dealt with it in the fiqh register, right? So my teachers would say,
Ibn Hazm will tell you a different story. That the ruh and the nafs is in the sperms.
but you know, so some of our teachers to make a good claim that what happens is that there are times when you have to go to fiqh. There are times you should just say theologically this is an abomination, right? And we should not be using fiqh to make okay abominations. This is an abomination. Yeah.
The West also made it illegal to clone.
Bush. No, they had this. Not a law. It's a agreement, right? To not do this. So there's in Bush's time they had, so we can't use stem cells and cloning. But this was an international sort of moratorium on genetic cloning. I mean, on cloning, human cloning.
They have the problem with therapeutic cloning is not allowed.
Presently, there's a moratorium. Right.
It's not, even the one I said, cloning an organ is not. It's a problem.
But they're building matrices to house cloning organs. Like the commercial.
Yeah.
What about
you have a question?
Where does Islamic Bioethics stand on questions of an organ, small organ, heart valve, that is coming from a pig? Because I think mitral valve can be from a pig, not another animal.
So, I mean, mashallah, these are questions that have been addressed by the Kabar ulama in the past. So, what it comes down to, I'll say what comes down to is when people say that you need something, we have technology to do something, but this is the only access to doing this, right? So everybody starts invoking darura, and you say, okay, but darura, we can use this, we can use that. But when there's alternatives, the question is when the alternatives, you have mechanical valve, then and you find that they're equal in efficacy, then you can't, the darura based ruling then is naqis, right? It's no longer can be applied. And so oftentimes when the first fuqaha were thinking about this, there was no alternative, or the technology wasn't as good. Even if you think about porcine heparin today, right? We can get synthetic heparin. I don't know what Oman procures, but you can get synthetic heparin. You want to pay more money? Go ahead, right? But we still use porcine-based heparin because it's less cost. And yet our fiqh said, okay, if you have an alternative, then you shouldn't be using this. So the same thing here. Fuqaha have said no problem. I mean, Sheikh Qardawi was talking about, it doesn't really matter. Whatever it is, you can use a pig organ. You can be using pig valve. It doesn't become a pig anything. When it's inside you, it's part of you, right? Right. There's no najasa at this point. So the fuqaha have said these things in many ways, but the initial ruling to why was because of the darura, right? And so now I just ask my patients. I say the same thing. Okay, well, do you have an alternative? If you want to ask the faqih will tell you that you can use it, but you have to know the shurut around what they're saying. If there's an alternative and it works for you, do you want to pursue the alternative or not? Now, some people there might be more complications because we know we have to give anticoagulants for mechanical valves versus porcine valves, and maybe you can't do that. But at least you're thinking about it as opposed to I'm just accepting the darura-based ruling. The darura is not our ideal, right? It's the non-ideal. And unfortunately, this is another challenge for us, that we never move out of the non-ideal state. So that's the general opinion on those sorts of things, of porcine valves and porcine-based things. There's now you talk, even the Majmahiyya, when I talked about vaccines, they were talking about istihala. So can things that are porcine in origin be transmuted into something else, like wine to vinegar, right? This is the Shafi classical idea of natural istihala. So there's a whole industry in Malaysia that uses DNA markers now. Do you know about this? They do DNA marking for porcine. It's okay, well, this is a halal, and like we have for food, right? Now they have for medicines and for other things. Okay, we're going to see if there are DNA markers of porcine, and if there are DNA markers, then it's not halal. Because they're at that level of complexity, they want to make sure there's no genetic traces left. While the Hanafis here are very permissive about istihala, yes. Okay. We don't do DNA-based things, yeah. We say any transmutations.
But the Hanafi are more
liberal about istihala.
Tonight, thank you very much. Sharji, you did not ask a single question.
Because
he has all the answers. He has all the answers.